Yo, I'm working on a 2012 Honda Civic. The girl's complaining about a little brake noise on the front. I think I found her noise. There's a little piece of metal that's just barely touching on the rotor. And it's basically the abutment clips, and a lot of times what happens is the pads get so rusted out that the pads stick on the abutment clips, and then it pushes the clips in with the pads, and then they start squeaking and making noise. So I'm going to take this caliper off and try to see if I can figure out why it did that anyways. I have a couple of 12 millimeters for these caliper bolts. Take those off. I don't want to push this caliper piston in yet. For now, I'm just going to take this off and kind of flop it out of the way. Get a little measurement on this just for fun. It's right at 2 millimeters. I got a depth gauge for measuring brake pads, and the smallest one is 2 millimeters. So she's definitely due for pads. And wow, this one, it's a little sticky. It doesn't want to move real good. Got some springs in here that are supposed to pull the pads out. They're not really doing their job anymore because it's too rusty. Yeah, it's not. This is a wear indicator right here. And what happens is when it gets down far enough, it'll actually touch. It's not quite touching yet. So that noise is definitely coming from someplace else. Well, this pad is wonderfully stuck. Yeah, these are way too tight. And I can see there's a little bit of a shiny spot on this abutment clip, so that thing just barely started touching. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's all shiny. And this side's not. So that's her noise, and it's pretty much due for front pads anyways. I might as well check these rear shoes while I'm at it. This has got rear drums on it. I'm going to want to take these drums off. There's 12 by 125 thread holes in here. I got a little bolt that's 12 by 125. I can just stick in here and try to force this out. And sometimes too, if you don't have anything like that, you can get like a propane torch and just heat up the outside of the drum to about 500 degrees, and it'll expand the center out enough to just get it off. These actually look really good. This one's getting down there a little bit. A lot of powder in here. See all that powder? The rear shoes usually last 2 to 1 versus the front, depending on your driving. Most of the time they last a really long time. I can give these a little measurement. The skinniest part is a little over 2 millimeter, and actually for a brake shoe, that's quite a bit. That'll last a long time. I don't see any leaky wheel cylinders or anything on here. Just a lot of brake dust material. So I probably don't have to do anything to this. I could lubricate it a little bit. I might as well, since I got it off, do a rear clean. Just clean everything up and lube it really good. I'm going to do that on both sides. I also noticed that the brake fluid, it's low, but it's going to be because the pads are wore down, but it's pretty dark. It's kind of green and gooky looking. So I'm going to put new brake fluid in it too. So I'm going to do front pads and rotors, rear clean and adjust, and a brake flush. Suppose I'm going to start off this job by getting the caliper pistons pulled in and get the brake fluid flushed out of here. I'm going to put this caliper, just throw it on right now. There's no pads or anything in here, but that's okay. I have a drain pan on the floor, and there's a little rubber cap right here for the bleeder. And this bleeder screw's a 10 millimeter. So I'm just going to loosen that up. It should start dripping fluid. I'm going to put a hose on it just so it goes in my pan a little better. So I got this hose going down to a pan. Boy, that's some cruddy looking brake fluid. And then I can see the piston in here, and I just want to make sure I don't want to touch this boot. There's a rubber boot in here, and I don't want to mess with that because I don't want to tear it or anything. I don't know. I just put a wedge in over here, a little plastic wedge, just so the caliper doesn't move around on me. And then I can get in here with a screwdriver. I can just pull this in real slow. Some people try to use a C-clamp on these to pull them in, but you can't really do that with the bleeder screw open like this, because then you got to take the caliper off to do it. So I'm just being real careful. Just nice and easy. Pull that in. I can look down in the hole with the flashlight too and just keep an eye on that boot. Make sure I'm not touching that sucker. This side's pulled in so I can take my line off. I can tighten this bleeder screw back up for now. I might as well take this caliper back off. I can look in here, and this boot, it's kind of got an air pocket in here, so it's not in all the way. So I just need to be super careful not to tear this boot, and I'm just going to stick this on the inside of here, and there's a little lip on the inside, and I can just barely touch off on it, and I just saw the air burp out of here. I can try to put this in again. I still got too much air in there, so I'm going to try to burp it again. There, burped it again. Looks like I got to do it one more time. There, that's good. I just got to do the same to the other side. This side I still got all the brake pads and stuff in here, and I can just try to get in between the pad and the piston. If these don't want to move too, you're going to want to replace this caliper, get a new one. They should pull in real easy. Some people might tell you need to hang these calipers too, because you don't want them hanging on the hose. These calipers though, without the support bracket on them, they're so light, I don't think it really matters. Somebody might want to argue with me about that one. Don't really care. Now for this brake reservoir. Take the cap off of that. I'm gonna pull this little screen filter thing out of here. I'm going to clean this with brake cleaner. I have a brake bleeder I'm going to suck this out of. A lot of people use turkey basters to get all the brake fluid out of here. Just going to try to suck out as much as I can. Just because I feel like it, I'm going to get in here with some Q-tips. I'm just going to swab all this gook out of the top of it. This nasty green sludge. Then I have a big 32-ounce bottle of brake fluid. I'm gonna just stick this whole thing in here. And I got a bungee cord here I'm gonna use to try to hold this bottle in here from coming out. So that's as far as the level it'll go. It should be fine just like that. I don't think it's going to come out. I'm going to start gravity bleeding this now. There's a plug just like the front right here on this bleeder screw. That's your wheel cylinder right there. So there's brake fluid in that. Then I'm going to open this up just like the front. And this one's an 8mm. So just to try to save a little mess, I can put a hose on this too. And I'm just going to let that drip in this pan until I get nice, clean, clear fluid out of it. I'm going to do the same to the other side too. That's some dirty fluid. I got both sides going now. Now that the rear brakes are gravity bleeding, I'm going to start on the fronts. There's two 17 millimeters for these caliper support brackets. Take that off. And then for the fronts, I have two Phillips screws to get these rotors off. And I have an impact hammer, and these I can just grab it and turn it counterclockwise and hammer on it. And it should knock them screws loose if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, you just drill them, or I use an air hammer sometimes. Seems to work pretty slick. So I want to get all this scale off of here and make sure it's nice and flat. Some people sand on these. I just use a carbide super scraper. Seems to work really nice. Run my finger around, make sure there's no high spots on here. I want to do the same thing with this caliper too. I want to try not to touch this piston seal, the dust boot, and just make sure this is scraped nice and clean. Don't want any high spots on the piston either. I can do the same with this surface right here. Now for these caliper support brackets, I'm getting new abutment clips. So I'm going to take these off. They're pretty much junk. I want to inspect these caliper pins. So I'm looking at the sealing surface right here to make sure it's clean, because this dust boot seals on this inside edge. There's a little bit of rust on there, so I'm gonna wire wheel these off and make sure they're nice and clean so they get a good seal. And I'm also going to take a file. I'm going to file these down so they're down to bare metal, because if there's any thick flake or scale on here, it can make the brake pad stick. I wiped all the old grease off of them. That surface, that sealing surface really doesn't look that bad, but I'm going to clean it anyways. That's better. I can live with that. Now I have a brush and a rag, and I'm just going to run this in here and get as much of the old grease out of here as I can. It's like a nylon bristle brush I got. Put some brake cleaner in here. I can blow these out with pressurized air. I'm going to hide my camera when I do it because I don't want brake cleaner all over my camera. I hosed them down and blew them off about 3 times. Now I got some 3M silicone paste. I'm going to stick a little in here. You don't need much. I remember the location of this rubber was on the left side. Doesn't really matter too much. Then after that, I can push this all the way in and then just squeeze this boot to burp it, get the air out of it. They should be sealed really nice. See, I'm not getting any air in them. So those are good. I have nice clean fluid coming out of this now. So I can take the hose off on both sides. Close this bleeder off. I'm waiting on parts for the front, so I might as well do a rear clean and adjust to the rear. I'm going to waste a can of brake cleaner on this. Just hose this down really good and get all this dusty powder out of here. I got a drip pan, of course. Oh, I got regular brake caliper grease for this. The only reason why you lube these too is to keep them from making noise. Sometimes your drums, they kind of move back and forth a little bit, and when they do, your pads move like this just a little bit, and sometimes they squeak. They're not squeaking right now, so they're probably fine, but I'm going to lube them anyways. There's just a few key spots that I like to lube before I put all this back together. One spot is these caliper pins. You can probably hear that little squeaking. So I like to put a little right around there. I'll just roll this around here until I can kind of get it all around. It doesn't make noise now. There's another There's another key spot though with these pins that people always miss. On the back side of the pin, these can make noise too. Now I can just push in on the pin and put a little bit of lube around this backing plate, because sometimes when this pin moves, it can squeak on the back side here, and that noise resonates just like a damn instrument. So yeah, I just pushed in right here on the pin with a pry bar, and then just got behind there and put a little lube on the back of that pin. And when I do that, it slides really nice and it doesn't make any noise. And then there's 3 contact points on the brake shoe. And I just want to try to pull this shoe open a little bit and just stick a little bit of lube on this little high spot here where the brake shoe touches the backing plate. There's a spot there and a spot there. And then there's another one on the bottom. And it's usually the same for every brake shoe on the face of the planet. They're pretty much all set up the same way. And some people put a little lube right here on this spot right in here. There's already lubricant on there from the factory. It's still there, amazingly enough. And that's really the only places you need to put it. Sometimes people put it on the top too. Sometimes people put it up here. I don't like messing with that though, because if I pull this out too far, this piston, this wheel cylinder piston can fly right out. So I just want to be careful of that. I can push it in just a little bit and then get in here and put some in here too. And then I just got to do the same exact thing to this side and then go over on the other side and do that other one. And then they should be lubed up really nice. And then I want to take a rag and I want to wipe the excess off of this pad, because you usually always leave a little bit on the pad. And if you don't get that grease off of there, this thing can chatter like a mother. And after you get it all lubed and you go like this, you shouldn't hear any noises coming out of this thing. And then you know it's going to be quiet when it's all put back together. And if you hear it squeaking anywhere, you got to figure out where that noise is coming from and lube it up real good in that spot until that noise goes away. And just do the same to the other side. After I get all of that done, I can put the drum back on. A lot of times there's a really heavy lip of rust right here that would be a good idea to sand down. This one really isn't that bad. So I'm going to leave it and I'm just going to wipe it down a little bit with a rag just to get the excess powder out of the thing. And this is your adjuster. I think it's working pretty good on this Honda. A lot of adjusters for rear drums don't really work very well, and sometimes you need to turn them up. This little tab right here is supposed to push down when the brakes engage if it's too loose, and it moves this thread right here, these little teeth. And the more I turn it down, the more the pad goes out. And you want to do that if you think you need to adjust the thing. Make sure that's nice and free. I just gave it like 2 or 3 clicks. One thing I'm going to do before I put that drum back on is make sure there isn't any scale on this either. It actually does feel a little loose. I could probably turn this up just a few clicks. I'm going to put this on all the way and see how it feels. Make sure it's all the way tight. And it's actually spinning too much, so I could adjust it up even more. I'm going to turn this cam up even more. And this will affect your pedal height too. Rear drum brakes, anytime you have a low pedal, it's usually always in your rear drum adjustment, unless you got some really wonky, funky stuff going on with your brakes. So that's usually what I attack first if anybody complains about their pedal height being too low. I can actually turn it up just a little bit more. I can feel it just barely dragging now. So
I'm going to leave it right there. It's probably absolutely perfect. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side.
I have some nice quality ceramic pads here. I'm going to put these new abutment clips in. And I got to put the right pad on the inside. The idea behind a wear indicator is to only have one, and you always want to put it on the corner of the pad that wears the most. So the inboard pad usually always wears the most because the caliper piston is actually pushing in on it. And then if you look at the position of where it goes on the inside, you got to figure the wheel's turning this way when you're going forward. So when you're hitting the brakes, it's actually the very top on this side is going to be hitting the pad on the rotor first. So on this particular side, on the driver's side, the wear indicator would be on the top inside because of the way the rotor's going. Now on the other side, the caliper's actually on the other side, so it's going to be backwards. So you always get one that's different from the other. I'm going to do the passenger side first. So I'm just going to put these in here. I don't put any lubricant on the abutment clips either. The factory doesn't either. I just think it collects dirt and stuff. And you can leave them clean and dry. It's really nice that way. You just want to make sure the pads move really good, and they do. They slide really nice. I have some fancy rotors here, and they got some Cosmoline type junk on them that I have to get off. I'll just use this brake cleaner I've been using on the rear. Make sure there's nothing left on it. A lot of times any rag will leave a little bit of fuzz on there. I want to get all that fuzz from the rag off, because that could get embedded inside the pad and make a little noise. And yeah, there's all kinds of paint and geez, what is this stuff? Now I can toss this caliper support bracket on. These caliper support bracket bolts get torqued to 80 foot-pounds. That's the same brake caliper grease I used for the rears. I'm going to put on the fronts, just the contact surfaces of the calipers. There's actually packets of this in the brake pads. And I put it on the piston too. Then I can go ahead and put these little spring-a-ding-ding things in here. And when I do this, I want to hold on to these pads because they will slide out. I got to hold on to the pad. Make sure this line isn't all twisted up. Don't want to twist up the brake line. Put this caliper on. These caliper bolts get torqued to 25 foot-pounds. And if you really need to hold this down, you can hold it down with a 19 millimeter wrench. I think that fits on here somehow. Then after you tighten those down too, you just want to make sure this caliper slides back and forth really nice. And you want to I can watch the pads in there and I can see they're moving really nice too, so nothing's binding up. Now I'm doing the passenger front because this is the longest line that I have. It's longer than the driver front. So I'm going to bleed this one next. I'm going to open this up and just let it drip out until I get clean, clear fluid out of this one. Oh, and by the way, all these bleeder screws too get torqued to 7 foot-pounds if you really want to use a torque wrench on them. I like to go by feel. That didn't take long at all. This side gravity bled out pretty quick. It didn't take much fluid. I already have the other side put together. So of course I'm going to tighten this line up. Put the plug back on this and I'm going to gravity bleed out the other side. Everything's together. I torqued the lug nuts down to 90 foot-pounds. All I got to do is take off this amazing apparatus. And I'm just going to be fast about this. Try not to make a mess. Brake fluid's pretty corrosive too, so you don't want to get any of that on the paint. If you get any brake fluid on the paint, you want to wash it off with water. It's hygroscopic, so it just washes off with plain water. I'm going to put this thing back in here. Put the cap on. I'm going to pump it up a few times, and I'm going to make sure the level's right. The max line is right here. It should be fine. And then all I got to do is drive down the road at 30 miles an hour and just tap on the brakes a couple of times, and then come to a slow stop and go on the freeway, hit the brakes a couple of times on the freeway just to bed the pads in, and this should be another amazing brake job.
Okay, bye.